everyone, this is Ilina and welcome to another Hero Arts card making video. For today's card, I will be using the color layering fall winter animal stencil and a sentiment from the coordinating stamp set Folk Winter Animals and coordinating die to cut out that stencil. So the stencil set comes with 3 stencils and they're marked with A, B, and C on the bottom left corner so you know which is the first, second, and third layer. So let's get started. I have already positioned my stencil in the Misty. You don't have to use Misty, you can just secure your stencil on a half sheet of cardstock that is 5.5 by 8.5. Usually I like using a larger piece of cardstock so I can trim around it and it's easier to tape the stencil down to it. So you can either tape it, or if you have any repositionable adhesive like stencil adhesive, you can use that. I like using a tape, and I'm also using post-it tape to mask different areas to apply ink. I'm using large ink blending brush and I'm applying Peony cardstock at select areas. I don't have rhyme or reason which areas I select. I just did it randomly, so I have good variation, good variety between the Peony, and then the second ink color I'm using is the Arctic Core ink, and I'll be also applying that one with a large ink blending brush. So you can see here I'm using the same tape over and over. You don't have to use post-it tape, you can use any other means you have for masking. Even scrap paper, like scrap printer paper, will work perfectly. So I know it's really hard to see here because the stencil is white on white, but you can see I'm kind of leaving some spaces for that Arctic color. So now I'm moving to the Arctic color and I'm using a different ink blending brush. So I'm not contaminating the Peony one with Arctic ink. And again, for this layer, I'm using different kind of set of post-it tape, so I'm not mixing the leftovers of the previous ink with the Arctic, because once you mix the Peony and the Arctic, it's kind of some weird brownish color that in particularly I didn't like, so I didn't want those two colors to mix together. So we're done with the first layer. And also, I forgot to mention the stencils have registration marks, so you can use it if you're not using Misty or any other positioning tool or stencil mat, or like any straight corner. To position the stencil, you can use those registration marks. Just put a little bit ink on the corners, and then it's very easy to layer the second and the third stencils. So now for the second stencil, I'm using Cotton Candy Core ink, and I'm also using Paradise and repeating the same process of masking. So I'm just going, and for this layer, I decided to use a small ink blending brush. So that way I don't need to mask everything. Like for some of the areas, I can just go directly with the brush, just making sure that I don't contaminate, don't go over the areas that the stencil have that Paradise ink, so they don't mix up. So we have a little bit more left here on the right side to add ink. Some of the ink application, I'm going over it one more time to create darker shade of that Paradise. And I'm doing pretty much the same with the Cotton Candy ink. So once we're done with the second layer, the third layer, we're not going to use ink, but we're going to use the Gold Hero paste to add some dimension and also some sparkle. I really like the shade of the gold of the paste, and I think it goes really good with the soft colors for this Christmas card. So I'm adding the third stencil here, and since I will be adding the hero paste, I'm adding more tape, and I'll also remove it from my Misty. I'm adding more tape to secure it to my surface. So I'm using the Hero Arts palette knife to add that paste, and I'm spreading it nicely over the entire stencil. I'm adding a little bit more so we can spread that more evenly, and making sure that everything is nice and covered, and I'm removing the excess too at the end since I want it to have very smooth and even application. So I'm just removing that extra and putting it back into my container. Okay, so now let's remove that stencil. Just go gently when you're removing the tape, and then also make sure that you're pulling off that stencil very gently so you don't smudge or smear that paste until it's dry. So here is a closer look. You can see all the shine and sparkle. And I will set it aside to dry. You can also use your heat tool on low setting to dry the hero paste. But while that is drying, I'm using a sentiment from the Folk Winter Animals stamp set. I'm using the Christmas and the Merry, and I'm stamping it on Peony cardstock using the clear embossing and watermark ink. I'm using anti-static powder tool to make sure that I don't have embossing powder stuck where I don't want it to be. You can see also in a second once we use, we'll be using the iridescent gold embossing powder, that it looks like the embossing powder is everywhere, but once we heat set it, I'm using a soft cloth. Actually, I will be using a Swiffer cloth. You can use anything that you have handy. I just had that one on my desk, so I use that one to wipe off the excess. So here we go. I'm adding that embossing powder, and you can see that it looks gold everywhere. You can barely see the sentiment there. But once we apply heat, it will just melt the embossing powder where we stamped. You can see here, you can see it clearly. So now what we'll do is just wipe off that excess, and you can see that it comes off very easily. Okay, so now we have the sentiment, and we can start kind of going towards assembling the card. I'll just die cut the sentiment using the coordinating dies, and they come all connected, so I'm using my paper snips to cut the two dies that I need, and I'll use tape to secure those to my cardstock, and then run it through my Hero Arts compact cutter. I'm making sure here that it's nice and centered, it's nicely positioned, and securing it down with tape. I'm using repositionable tape, so it's easy to, it does not really stick to the cardstock when we have die cut the sentiment or the image. It's very easy to remove. Okay, so we have that sentiment. I'll just take it off, and then off camera I die cut twice without stamping of the Merry and the Christmas. I'll use to stack and add dimension. So now let's start assembling our card. I have the stenciled background. I'm trimming my panel down to 4 by 5.25, which is a little bit smaller than A2 card size. Next we'll stack the white die cuts. I'm adding some Hero Arts Precision Glue in one of them, and adding the second one on top. I'm using my reverse tweezers to do that because they're so tiny, so the tweezers come pretty handy. I'm doing the same thing, stacking the Christmas. And then I will add the stamped and embossed sentiment on top and offset a little bit in order to create some shadow to add a little dimension. I'm doing the same thing with the Merry. Okay, I think that looks good. I was gonna put them in the center of that panel and then decided to move them to the bottom right corner. I think that looks good. And now I will add some foam strips on the backing to add more dimension. If you don't want your cards to have a lot of dimensions like I do, you can omit and just add liquid or any other adhesive of your preference on the back and then add them to the panel. But I like dimensions, so that's why I'm using foam tape. Next, I've placed a ruler on top of my stencil background to make sure that I add that sentiment straight. You can either use T-ruler or regular ruler. You can eyeball it. It's completely whatever is your preference. You can use that method. I did not have my T-ruler handy, so I just use a regular ruler. I'm also adding some liquid adhesive on back of the foam tape, so it gives me a little bit more wiggle room. So even if I put it down crooked, I have a little bit of time to straighten and sentiment. So now let's assemble our card. I have a top folding white dove note card, and also I have A2 panel that I cut from Peony cardstock. A2 is 4¼ by 5½, and I added it top of the note card. If you don't want too much weight on your card, you can make the card directly from Peony, your note card from Peony cardstock. And then I added on top just the stencil panel with the sentiment. And that finishes our card for today. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also visit our blog for more ideas and more inspiration. Bye!